This is the second installment in our study of lyric poetry in the second semester. So this one's going to focus on the sonnet, which is a very specific type of literary work. It has very specific rules that go along with it. So we're going to cover definitions, context for reading. I'm going to do this using an example of a Shakespearean sonnet. So take notes. Make sure you are prepared with how to review a sonnet and then can replicate those skills when you come into class tomorrow. So to be specific in our discussion of the sonnet, we break it down in a couple of types. The type I'm going to address here is the Shakespearean or the English sonnet. Now, by definition, every sonnet is 14 lines. Each line has 10 syllables. So that means that this poem has exactly 140 syllables. It's always about love. It can be about missing love. It can be about how you don't have love. It can be about how love dumped you and you're sad as a result. But these are some specific elements that's part of the definition. So if we're talking about the Shakespearean sonnet, it's divided into 3 quatrains and a couplet. A quatrain is a series of 4 lines. The first and the third line of that quatrain rhymes with each other, and the second and fourth line of that quatrain rhymes. So this creates a specific rhyme scheme pattern throughout the entire sonnet. We'll review more about that rhyme scheme in class. Be sure to ask me about it so you can write it down. We know that the lines of a sonnet are written in iambic pentameter. That means that there are 10 syllables per line, and it means that each of the odd syllables is unstressed and the even syllables are stressed. Don't worry about that too much. You saw it in Romeo and Juliet with Shakespeare, but it's also the natural speaking pattern of the English language. So we use it anyway when we speak every day. The last little piece here of this section is, how do you read a sonnet? You got to read it from capital letter to end mark. Any poetry that you read, whether it's carpe diem, whether it is lyric poetry, you read from capital letter to whatever that end mark is. That's where the pause in the line is. Usually that's the end of the complete thought. So that way you have an image, you have how that image is being used and why it matters. You can do all of that in just one segment. So every time you read, you have the same specific set of skills. So when we take a look at the sonnet in the next piece of this presentation, you have a set of skills that you can use to put those ideas together. So here is an opportunity to look at Sonnets 116 by William Shakespeare, in particular the first 4 lines or the first quatrain. Now, what exactly is a quatrain? A quatrain is a 4-line stanza in a poem. It's designed to be self-contained. It has one set of ideas, starts with a capital letter, ends with an end mark, and it is a standalone thought. We know the Shakespearean sonnet contains 3 of these quatrains followed by a unifying couplet. So as Shakespeare writes, for its musical quality, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. This is a definition of love, what it is, and in some cases, what it is not. Once we identify the quatrain and its sort of main idea, we look to its particular images. Now again, a definition of imagery is the pattern of related comparative aspects of language, particular of images in a literary work. For example, images of light and darkness pervade James Joyce's Araby, his story The Boarding House and the Dead. So too does religious imagery. So when we take an individual quatrain, we have to be able to identify those particular images as they link. Now, for the sake of mixing up the video presentation, I had to move in the building to find a new place. But taking a look at quatrain number 2, this is what it says. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. So the first stanza, as you saw in the PowerPoint clip, is about love. That love does not change, that it is ever constant. In the second stanza, it takes that same idea and compares it now to a ship that is sailing, who spends its time looking at the stars. So this is an image that we get. The ship is able to navigate based on the stars. Just like the ship and the stars, love navigates the human through life. So the second stanza advances the ideas of the first stanza. So again, the first two lines. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. So love, in the midst of rough storms, never wavers. This is a tangible idea that makes a tremendous amount of sense to us as we look and we focus on the imagery. The second two lines of that stanza. It is the star to every wandering bark. A bark is a ship, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. So we don't know the true worth of the star, and we don't know the true height that it reaches, but our imagination doesn't care about those tangible bits of information. They see the star and it guides the person. So if we're equating love with the star, this is a tangible image that makes sense to us in the first now 8 lines of the stanza. So at this point, you have a clear definition of how the sonnet functions. So in a class exercise, given any type of sonnet, whether it is Shakespearean, the 3 quatrains and the couplet, or a Petrarchan sonnet, which is the octave and sestet, you know what you're looking for. You should be able to identify imagery, figurative language, metaphors, similes, any of those techniques from our lecture on lyric poetry. At some point in this semester, you will be held accountable for those particular skills, much more in the application than in the just write them down on a sheet of paper. So that concludes this second major lesson on poetry. We'll work in class on making sure that we have examples of how this functions and keeping us right on track with developing our literature.